singing. Perfect. We'll all rise for a moment of personal reflection. I would ask Councillor Gardner to help lead us sing the national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras sait porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. We acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Bernadette Clement.
Présente.
Councillors Claude McIntosh. Elaine McDonald.
Present.
Sid Gardner.
Si.
Dean Hollingsworth.
Present.
Caroline Hébert.
Présent.
Councillors Modeste Pell.
Present.
Glenn Grant.
Present.
Todd Bennett.
Present.
Justin Towndale.
Present.
And Eric Bergeron.
Present.
Any additions, deletions, or amendments?
I have
Madam
one,
Clerk?
Madam
Oh.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
I have one. It's the addition of the presentation of Team Dupuis that is here tonight. They are the Ontario Curling Club champions.
Yes to that. And Councillor Elaine McDonald.
And PAC report number 2.
Remove and put into communications. Thank you. Adoption of the agenda. Councillor Towndale, seconded by Councillor Gardner. All in favor? Any disclosure of interest? We're interested in the fact that firefighters just walked into the room. Welcome. Any disclosure of interest? No? Motion for Committee of the Whole, going into Committee of the Whole. Councillor Caroline Hébert, Councillor Todd Bennett, all in favor? Carried. The minutes of March 25th, 2019. Councillor Dupel, seconded by Councillor Todd Bennett. All in favor? Question? Oh, correction, Councillor McIntosh.
Yeah, on the creation of Environmental and Climate Change Committee, I voted in favor.
I will add the addition.
It looks like your name is not there at all.
I just missed you.
We missed you. Sorry, Councillor McIntosh.
I didn't miss him.
Oh, and we're off and running, and we're off and running. All right, presentations. Madam Clerk.
Our first presentation this evening is an invitation to sign the Book of Recognition, and we have with us firefighter Kevin McCarty, and I believe Councillor Towndale would like to introduce him.
Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It gives me great honor to rise today to recognize one of our new city firefighters, Kevin McCarty, who is a retired sergeant with the SNG Highlanders. He was recently awarded the commendation, the Commander of the Royal Canadian Navy's commendation. I'm going to read his citation. From January to May 2018, Sergeant McCarty was the acting medals distribution manager at the Directorate of Honors and Recognition. Realizing that deployed ships were not receiving medallic recognition in a timely manner, he seized the initiative and engaged key stakeholders within the Canadian Joint Operation Command and the Royal Canadian Navy to effect positive change. His actions resulted in an expedited medal ordering process, permitting medals to be presented to ships companies during or immediately after their deployment. And I had the pleasure of working with Sergeant McCarty during his time with the SNG Highlanders. Congratulations, it's well deserved, and you've been credited upon yourself, the city, and the former unit. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Sergeant McCarty. Can I ask you to say a few words?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm very humbled to be here. I don't know, talking to microphones not my thing. This team effort, I had 10 amazing people working for me that made this happen. I try not to be somebody who's going to let success go to my head, nor do I want to be somebody who's going to rest on my laurels. Really excited to work for the city. My brothers in the back of the room here are going to hold me accountable to that. I'm making sure that I keep the trajectory that I'm on going. And like I said, really happy to be here. Beyond humbled, thank you very much. Hope you have a good night.
We're very proud to have you, and it's good to see your colleagues here. Always good to get a sense of brotherhood, as you said, and sisterhood. It's very important. So thank you very much.
And we also have another invitation to sign the Book of Recognition, and this one is to Team Dupuis, the Ontario Curling Club champions. Matt, if you'd like to come to the table, maybe introduce your teammates.
Hi, my name is Matt Dupuis. We have Terry Litchie playing third. We had Jonathan King playing second, and Charlie Work playing lead.
Can you tell us about...
Oh yes, by all means. Sorry, I didn't know
Please.
I was going to do it. So we represented, we won the curling club here in Cornwall last year. After winning that event, we were able to enter into the club championships. We then entered in the region, won the provincials, ended up going to the nationals in Miramichi. We competed there, and we won a bronze medal at the national event there.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
May I let people know that you were talking about future goals? Can you talk about that? Because this is a team that is ambitious. And so you're not, like Sergeant McCarty said, you're not resting on any laurels. You're moving forward. So can you let us know?
Yeah, we're obviously trying to represent Cornwall as best that we can, so we're going to be entering into more events. Obviously, Cornwall's running the Tankard next year, so we have a goal of trying to make the Tankard and hopefully represent Cornwall in that way as well, and a hometown team being there, hopefully. So.
Yes. Congratulations. Yes, Councillor Gardner.
If I may, I had the pleasure of playing with Matt in just this year, and thank you for teaching me a heck of a lot. And I thought you only cleaned the ice, but you were also curling with Matt. So congratulations, guys. I've watched you curl at the curling club, and you do got a fantastic job. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, keep talking about Cornwall and spreading the news out there, so it's good.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
We're starting the consent portion of the agenda. PAC report number 1 regarding vacant parcel located on Marlow Avenue, northwest of Education Road. The recommendation is that Council approve the PAC recommendations as presented. A, that the subject lands be rezoned from manufacturing 40 to manufacturing 40 with exceptions, in support of a new commercial storage facility development, and B, that the new development be subject to a comprehensive site plan control approval process and the Phase 2 archaeological assessment be conducted prior to allowing development on the north limit of the property. I guess that's our only item.
Motion? Councillor Caroline Hébert, seconded by Councillor Maurice Depel. Any comment, question? All in favor? Carried.
We have no resolutions and we have no unfinished business reports. Communication item 1, draw on social housing reserve funds, Religious Hospitalers of St. Joseph Housing Corporation, Marie de la Fère Apartments. The recommendation is that Council approve the withdrawal of $81,160 from the Social Housing Providers Reserve Fund for necessary capital repairs that exceed their capital reserve fund as per their submitted business case to the service manager.
Is there a motion? Councillor Gardner? You making that motion?
Yes, I am.
Seconded by Councillor Depel. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Grant and then Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not familiar with this reserve fund. I wonder if somebody could have explained exactly how it operates, et cetera, and so I have a good understanding of this because it's new to me.
I was hoping someone would ask that question. Madam CAO, if you want to give ask who should give a high-level summary here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Maybe I'll give a high-level summary. We have a couple of social housing reserves. We do have one that's very specific to Cornwall and Area Housing Corporation that is solely owned by the corporation, the city. We also have another reserve that is contributed by many of these not-for-profit providers. And within that reserve, there's contributions made from their surpluses over the years. And through that as well, there's an opportunity for them to apply for special requirements such as a capital project. But I think I would like to turn it over to Ms. Ferguson to, I think, elaborate specifically on this reserve for these projects.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
So we do have this reserve fund for the non-Cornwall and area housing providers. There's approximately $2 million in this reserve that has been built since devolution. So we took over social housing from the province about 18 years ago, I'll say. And there was money that was taken or provided by the province into this reserve fund. So we haven't had any providers access this fund in about 7 years. And the reason for that was that there was a number of initiatives from the province over the past 7 years, including SHIP funding, where those funds were provided by the province so the social housing providers could do all of these capital repair as well as the energy efficiencies. These two providers in the next two reports were to receive the Green On funds, and those were canceled. So these two providers had already planned on doing these projects prior to the cancellation of the Green On funds. So these providers can make a business case to the service manager, which is us, outlining why they need to go into the social housing reserve. We typically they have to utilize any of their reserves first for their capital before they can use the reserve that is held by us. In addition, if they have any surpluses in operating in that year, we do expect them to use all of their surpluses for these for this capital project before they also come into the reserves. So these dollars are including their surplus operating as well as their capital funds.
Yes, go ahead.
So there's two. How many are there in total that contribute to this reserve that we're responsible for approving capital repairs?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we have Cornwall and area housing that is separate, and in the regular social housing reserve, we have Cornwall nonprofit and 12 other housing providers.
12 others. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I had a question regarding this item, and it sort of ties into the next item as well, as they're similar.
Mm-hmm.
What are the capital repairs? What's the project? It references a business plan, but there's not much information given here in that scope. Normally when we receive funding requests, there's some sort of background provided.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the first provider has a substantial amount of repairs to do this year because they have two elevators both in poor repair. So the majority of the money that we will be giving them will be going towards that elevator repair. They're also looking to replace their fire panel as it doesn't meet criteria right now. And they're also looking at their roof replacement, a canopy roof replacement, as well as they had some underground work done last year, which used up all of their capital reserves, and there's a lot of damage to the ground in their area.
That's for this, for the
That's
first?
for this provider. So the second provider is a complete roof replacement.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam.
Does Deputy Chief Weber want to comment? You're
Sorry,
put
I
on the
need to throw
spot.
you under the bus there.
Been thrown under the bus more than that. I'm not aware of the projects that are actually concerning the fire alarm panel. However, certainly fire alarms do have a life span, as well as the devices and things that are attached to them all have a lifespan. So I would imagine it's probably either end of life or it's not meeting the adequate concerns of the fire service.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I have one. Since it's been 7 years since the reserve was accessed, that seems long to me. Is that because they've had enough funds to do other upkeep, or is it because there's not been much upkeep?
They all have their capital reserves.
Right.
Or the capital expenditures that they have every year built into their budget. But because we've had all of these additional funds over the last several years, they've been able to maintain those additional expenses.
So
that
they haven't
weren't
had to
expected.
come to this
They
fund?
haven't had to come.
So this is the first time in 7 years?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abad?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question. So these are two that had been approved for the green on funding that was cut. Are there other providers that were also cut for some projects that we might expect this to come to us in the near future?
Through you, Madam Mayor. No,
Yes.
these were the only two
Okay.
providers that were actually eligible through Green On.
Thank you.
And what is the health of those funds that we have? The social, do you know how healthy are those funds that we have currently?
They're just over $2 million in each of the two funds.
Okay, and is that a good amount?
I will defer to Ms. Bailey.
Yes, according to the CFO.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I'm sorry, I really couldn't answer that question this evening. I'm not sure the value of their portfolios,
Okay.
so I wouldn't be able to comment if $2 million is an appropriate reserve level.
Okay, all right. We can ask later. Yeah, okay, thank you. Any further questions? All in favor? Carried.
Draw on social housing reserve funds, B. Lindsay Seniors Residence. The action recommended is that council approve the withdrawal of $140,000 from the social housing providers reserve fund for necessary capital repairs that exceed their capital reserve fund as per their submitted business case to the service manager.
Motion, Councillor Caroline Hébert, Councillor Elaine McDonald. Yes, questions. Councillor Grant and then Councillor Hollingsworth.
I was going to ask it for the last one, but I know I can only speak once.
No, go ahead, Councillor Grant.
Following the rules, that a boy.
Be nice, Bob. I'm just wondering, in our annual budgeting, do we budget to put dollars in this reserve each year, or once it gets a certain point, do we just leave it at that?
Madam CFO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I may direct the question back to Ms. Ferguson, but I believe we don't put money in this reserve, but if money does go into the reserve, I believe it's 50% of the surplus of a provider at the end of the year contributes to this reserve. But if you'd like to.
Sorry,
Ms.
through you,
Ferguson.
Madam Mayor. So Ms. Bailey is correct. We do 50% of their operating surpluses go into this reserve, as well as 100% of our department budget surpluses go into this reserve.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if I get this right, up until now, there's always been funds available, so we haven't had to dip into the reserve. That being said, is this a trend that we can expect moving forward, needing for these organizations to dip into the reserve? Is this the new kind of thing that's going to start having to happen?
Ms. Ferguson, yeah.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I can't predict that. However, this is an aging stock. Most of our social housing stock was built in the 70s. So they're getting up there in age, and they are going to need repairs. However, we are having an announcement for the National Housing Strategy coming out very soon, and it is anticipated that there will be dollars for repairs and maintenance within that National Housing Strategy. But I do expect there will be some more requests going forward.
Okay, that being said, these organizations kind of contribute to their own reserve currently, right?
Yes, as well as the department.
Are we gonna eventually, if this kind of trend was to start being consistent, are we gonna have to start kicking in some money? Do you anticipate that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, what I think. It's really hard to say. It really depends on how much the federal government and the provincial government will be announcing Thursday on what kind of dollars we have for repairs and maintenance. So if they announce that they wouldn't give us any dollars for repairs and maintenance to the extreme, then obviously we're going to have to come up with another strategy to maintain these housing stock. because we are required by the provincial government to maintain a certain number of units. So if we don't maintain those units and there aren't people occupying those units, we could potentially lose funding for those units. So we really do have to ensure a service level standard.
That being said, Your Worship, well, certainly I'll support the motion. I think it's a trend we need to at least keep a bit of an eye out for, so that we're not caught kind of in between down the road. Certainly, I expect sure the administration will keep track with council as well, so that if we have to start budgeting, we're not caught short at inopportune time. So, thank you.
Councillor Elaine McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I should have asked this question in the discussion of the Marie de la Feder Apartments when the question was asked about Bean Ontario Fund having been cancelled and impacting these people. But did that not impact Cornwall area housing too? There was some funding that we had anticipated getting on a continuing basis, and I think we lost maybe a couple $1 million.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Cornwall area housing lost $3 million.
Yeah. So much for climate change provisions.
Any other questions? I just want to follow up on, so the National Housing Strategy, that's all federal dollars, or is the province kicking in some funds depending on what the feds kick in?
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Yes, it is an obligation that the province match the federal dollars in order to receive those federal dollars.
Right, and those announcements are coming?
Well, the provincial budget is Thursday.
Yes, we're all shaking.
Yes, the bilateral agreements have been signed
Okay.
with most of the provinces and the federal government. So once those are signed for Ontario and they commit to those dollars, then we will have that announcement.
Okay, all right, thank you. All in favor of the motion? Carried.
Our next item is the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Communities Funding Stream. The recommendation is that Council endorse the submission of an application to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Communities Funding Stream, and 2, the projects submitted for the funding program shall be LeMay Street upgrades and extension, phases 3 and 4.
Someone prepared to make the motion? Councillor Caroline Hébert, Councillor Elaine McDonald. Questions? Yes, Councillor Eric Bergeron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure who to address the question to, so I will.
We'll figure it out.
Heed your advice. When I read that report, it talks a lot about airports and marinas, or not marinas, but harbors. Was it factored into our decision as a city, these 2 assets that we have, if we had a project that could have fell within that funding stream?
Madam CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think that going through the program criteria, we had identified this project as being potentially a good, successful candidate. We did not investigate further with respect to a marine, harbor, or potentially an airport project within this within the criteria of this program. So, to answer your question, we focused on, and we were anticipating through this project, through the 2019 capital submission, we're also anticipating to try and acquire some funding for part of these projects in our municipal workshed and LeMay Street.
Okay. LeMay Street is an infrastructure project. Would development fees not have covered most of that as a project in general? I've read the report, but it said that
Development charges.
So during our budget proceedings,
Yep.
our development charges go towards infrastructure projects, but this is a separate item from that.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to look to Mr. Bailey to help us on that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the LeMay Street project in the 2019 budget was to be financed. There were no development charges for this project. It wasn't part of our study. So there's $500,000 included in the 19 budget for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Elaine McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. One was relating to the phrase that was in the description of these monies coming to us, that if the money involved was over $10 million that we had to do a climate lens assessment. And I thought that was a pretty wonderful phrase to come across because obviously we're all trying to be much more cognizant of impacts on the climate of anything we do. And I know this was just for phases 3 and 4, but given the totality of the project, it probably was over 10 million, was it? Yes. So what did that involve, the climate lens assessment? Or would it simply be the fact that it's going to be a better road and it's going to have a bike lane, and it's going to have accommodations for, pedestrians and cyclists? Is that sufficient to give us a positive score or evaluation in terms of the climate lens evaluation?
We're looking at Mr. Fawthrop. Yep.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the project that we're applying for as LeMay Street would not require a climate lens assessment based on the terms of the funding program. So that would be for projects that are over $10 million.
So this isn't. Oh, so then we're able to isolate these phases from the rest of the LeMay Street. I thought we would take the whole project, whether it takes 3 or 4 years.
Through you, Madam Mayor, these will be the last 2 phases of LeMay Street. So this will finalize the project.
Okay,
so this will include the work at 13th Street as well as the work at McConnell Avenue.
Okay. Well, it's kind of too bad that we didn't kick in with doing the climate lens assessment right away, but I imagine going forward we'll certainly have to meet that standard even on expenditures of less than 10 million. So my other 2 questions were, is this a one-time thing or is this going to be an annual opportunity for us? I know it's not a sure thing. We apply for this grant, but is this something that we're going to be able to apply for repeatedly?
Madam CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So there are 2 intakes, I believe, that we've been informed of right now. So this is the first intake. We're limited to 1 application. There will be a second intake that will be, I think, also broader in scope that will allow some other components of applications other than what you have in front of you this evening.
Okay.
But right now it's 1 application for phase 1. There is no guarantee, so we're trying to make sure that we hit an application that we think hopefully would be successful.
Yes.
In obtaining funding.
Yes, especially since there are different types of projects that are allowable, and I certainly hope that the culture and recreation opportunities, come through
Would be
a similar opportunity in the future.
Phase 2.
So then my last question was, did we choose to nominate this project because it's shovel-ready, as they say? And obviously this money couldn't be used for design and that sort of thing. It had to be construction.
Mr. Fawthrop.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we chose it for many reasons. One being it's really one of our highest priority road-related projects and transportation-related projects. It was included in the 2019 budget, so we're hoping that helps it make it a successful project. By showing a financial commitment already made by the city, it kind of shows how high we feel it is up on the priority list. So we felt that this project would, I guess, we have the highest chance of success with this project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And apart from its benefits to the yard in Ontario Street, I think this LeMay Street project has been, from a social point of view, very beneficial to the housing development that we have on LeMay and McConnell. So this is a very good thing. Glad to see it. I hope we win the award.
Any other questions? Just like to make a comment. I think that just to build on Councillor Bergeron and Councillor McDonald's questions, I think it'll be good for us at our strategic planning to take a look at what other projects are shovel-ready or next on the priority list, because we may be entering a phase as we head to an election where there's money coming, and it'd be good for us to know what the next projects are, which ones are of the highest priority for the city based on our asset management plan, but also based on the discussions that we have around the council table. Okay. All in favor? Carried.
Our next item is an amendment to Schedule A of Bylaw 2019-34, with the recommendation that Council approve the amendment to Schedule A, Table 1, Landfill Tipping Fees of the Waste Management Bylaw 2019-34, tires at no charge.
Motion? Councillor Hébert, Councillor Grant, any questions? Do we know anything about the background for these regulations? I'm looking at Mr. DeWitt.
I do not know anything about the background. My understanding is that there's a province that's moving towards, what do you call that? Where people take care of their own products, like from cradle to grave. And I think what's happened here is just a name change, really. Like they've been incorporated into a larger organization, and so they went from Ontario Tire Stewardship to Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority, and it's just a larger entity in the province.
Okay. So no fundamental change for us. Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Quarterly report, economic development, with a recommendation that council receive this report.
Motion to receive. Councillor Towndale, Councillor Bennett. Questions? Comments? Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It doesn't necessarily relate entirely to this report, but I had a question because through you, as Mr. Peters, I'm sorry, but you're here, I'm going to pick on you a bit. You may have seen this. This Canadian Federation of Independent Business put out a report claiming that we're not a very entrepreneurial city. In fact, they weren't very kind to us. So I wondering if you had any comments or a rebuttal to that.
Mr. Peters.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I haven't seen the report, but I do have a rebuttal. I think a characterization that would say Cornwall is not an entrepreneurial city or is not a good city for business could be easily refuted by the number of small businesses that have opened in the last several years and continue to open and continue to thrive. In past years, that particular report, although I have not seen this year's report, that particular report has ignored things like unemployment rates and other factors that would define a city's economic health and its ability to do business, and simply because of the breadth of the report trying to measure communities and cities of varying sizes across Canada, so it's a difficult job to compare apples and apples. But I would certainly refute any suggestion that Cornwall is not a good place to do business and not a good place to live or play for that matter.
Councillor Gardner.
My question is to Mr. Peters. Kevin Lajoie and I recently attended a conference where the mayor of Hawkesbury and Edmundston were here, and the discussion was about French immigration. And given that companies like Walmart and Alamo are looking for people to work in their businesses, Hawkesbury has bought into the program. Edmundston has virtually a zero unemployment rate because of these programs. The federal government and the provincial government both have a program that I would like to see our administration try and tap into, bring in francophone immigrations or French immigration people to Cornwall to fill those jobs, knowing that we have NAVCAN that could take care of them while we're looking for housing for these people. It's a good program, and I think Cornwall has the services in French that could, when these people come in, could speak in their language, could be serviced in their language, and certainly we need the workers. So I wonder if your department will try to tap into this immigration policy that both the province and the feds have.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Your Worship. Our department has been aware of, for some time, a desire from both the province of Ontario and by extension the government of Canada to see more French immigration take place in Ontario, and we believe Cornwall is a leading candidate for that type of activity, primarily due to the cultural assets that are already here, the history and the heritage of the community when it comes to the French language, but the day-to-day services that are available not only at the municipal government level, at other government offices, but at businesses in town. So if you are francophone in Cornwall, you feel welcome and you're able to converse and do business in your own language. And to that effect, we've made a lot of investments and a lot of activities with regards to attracting newcomers to Cornwall and francophone speaking or francophone newcomers as well. I'm aware of the meeting that you referred to, and I'm aware of other efforts in the community that are ongoing to bring in, again, not just francophone immigrants, but newcomers to bolster our workforce. Certainly, as a community, we need to get younger, and we need to grow to meet and maximize the opportunities that our private sector is presenting. So I would echo your comments, and I can assure you that we will continue to pursue those avenues to attract new residents to Cornwall.
I just seem to feel at one point that the city wasn't quite as involved as the other groups, and that we could add the leverage of the city, the municipality, to try and help to get some immigration, French immigration. And I thank you for your answer.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Peters, just maybe two quick questions. What is our current unemployment rate in the city? Do you know that?
Through you, Your Worship, at the current time, I can't quote you an official unemployment rate for Cornwall because it's not available. The unemployment rate, which is provided for a larger region in Eastern Ontario, includes Cornwall. But anecdotally, and I can tell you that our effective unemployment rate, although it may not match zero, is effectively very close to that, as if you're capable and able and willing to work and actively looking for work, we have companies that are looking to hire, and across a wide variety of sectors. Having said that, of course, that not every job opportunity fits every resident, and there will always be people, for whatever circumstance, that may fall within the unemployed definition.
Second question, just so I have my facts straight. Internet tells me it's 5.8% nationally. Is that making sense to you?
I would consider our rate to be very close, if not below, the national provincial averages.
That being said, Your Worship, as far as us not being entrepreneurial, I certainly am not an no, I'm just saying with regards to the, I don't know, but if we're below the national average, at least it's certainly something positive we can hang on. Thank you.
Councillor Duppel, and then Councillor Bergeron.
Very much, Madam Mayor. Maybe through you to Mr. Peters, I was just wondering, because it's always interesting when you read the report from Economic Developments about where the trade shows that we're attending or the conferences that we're attending. And I was just wondering that maybe in the future, I don't know, on a couple times a year, if we could get like a little elaboration on, you know, how many staff attended that, and versus how many people that came through, and just some stats on those events, because I think they're really important events that our department attends, and it would be nice just to, not in the way of a formal report, but just maybe add it into this. It's always a detailed report that we get from Economic Development, so just thought maybe adding some of that to it might be of interest to myself for sure, and certainly some of my colleagues. So,
Mr. Peters?
Through you, Your Worship, I think that's an excellent point. We do make an effort to tell people prior to the show that we're going to be at the show. We've also done a lot of outreach with community groups to invite them to stand with us at the show, because we feel it gives an added dimension, whether it's a business show or a tourism show. But an after-show report, of course, we do get that from the people who attended the show, but sharing that perhaps with other city managers and council certainly is a good idea, and I thank you for the idea. So
yeah, no, my pleasure.
Councillor Bergeron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a quick question, I think also for Mr. Peters. There's a reference to a tourism strategy plan. Is there a rough estimate of when that would come before council, if in fact it does?
Through you, Your Worship, the idea certainly would be to bring it back before and in front of council. What I would want to point out is that currently the staff are working under a very comprehensive and detailed marketing plan that has obviously elements of a strategy within it, but a pure strategic plan specifically that is aimed at tourism. It was a recommendation of the Economic Development Strategic Plan, and would go further than the Economic Development Strategic Plan in addressing those. The idea would likely be to be, in all honesty, we would work on it throughout the summer months as we're dealing with the activity, and to finalize it and bring it back likely in the fall. What's also important in that is stakeholder input, but what we're looking at right now is a staff-led internal effort as opposed to going out to and ask for a consultant and lead an external effort. But most important would be information garnered over the busiest months in the summer, and speaking directly with tourists, but also speaking with event organizers and other stakeholders in the community. So those are valuable inputs into the development of that strategy that would likely occur over the next several weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The accommodation tax fund that is, there's supposed to be a corporation separate from the city being created. When can we expect that to come online?
Thank you. Through your worship. The Tourism Development Fund, which would be created from the results or from the proceeds, some of the proceeds from the municipal accommodation tax, would be administered by the Tourism Development Corporation of Cornwall. That corporation has been set up. We just had a call for directors of that corporation. Those directors will be selected and put in place. Starting today, we will be looking for members to sit on a review committee to review any applications for funding that may come into the fund. And hopefully with the new board, they would solidify that committee. And our target date for the start of intake of applications would be in May. The idea would be that we would have an intake process that was year-round to allow events at different times of the year or any other project at any time of the year to apply to the fund. So that process will become more public and more defined as we move forward, with an idea that applications would start to be received in May.
Thank you.
Councillor Elaine McDonald?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just a follow-up question to that, would we look to the city website to see a link to this board when it's set up, or will it have an independent presence on the web?
I don't believe it will have an independent, through your worship. Currently on the city website, I believe you'll find an advertisement for committee members. If not today, then certainly tomorrow, as we did with advertising for directors for the board. Most of the information about the Tourism Development Fund will be found on cornwalltourism.com. And as that fund and the application process is refined and developed, that will likely be the home for it. With regards to the reporting process from that corporation or any other marketing or communications from that corporation, we would leave that to the board to determine and to direct.
Okay,
city staff will be a resource to the board, but the board will be an independent body.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments, questions? I have a couple, Mr. Peters. So, just on the issue of tourism, the tourism guide came out, so that's great. And I wanted to know, because I think most of our tourists come from Quebec. Am I correct there? And are we doing more targeted advertising there with the tourism guide, or how does that work?
Again, thank you for the question. I wouldn't say that most of our tourists come from Quebec.
Okay.
I think the majority of our tourists, if you added them up, are probably would be easier defined by category, such as attending a defined event, whether it's a sporting event or a business event. And because those numbers then would likely outweigh any transient tourists and visitors, which, by the way, would be very difficult to measure and to mark. Certainly because of our proximity to Montreal and the size of that population of West Quebec, it certainly makes up a large percentage of the tourists. Our marketing tends to be, if you look at the locations of trade shows, we do a number of trade shows in Quebec, and one of the reasons for that is simply because in Eastern Canada, many of those shows end up being in Montreal as opposed to Toronto, and we feel that the closer a show to us, especially for tourism, the more likely we are to have more success. One of our goals this year is to reinstitute a fairly sophisticated tracking and metrics gathering process so that we will be able to answer that question very quickly and very accurately as to where people visiting Cornwall originate from. So right now,
do you know what's that going to look like? Like I'm picturing some movie Matrix thing.
We're working with the regional tourism, the RTO 9, formerly known as Great Waterway, now Southeastern Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
We want to match our information gathering with the information gathering from other communities in Eastern Ontario and see where we're different and where we're alike. And we know of that the Parks of St. Lawrence also gather information on their visitors as well. And we're going to be working with our stakeholders, such as some of our accommodation partners and other event organizers who are gathering that information as well. So how it will look out, we're hoping that RTO 9, as they have in the past, have established a template and a system to accurately measure that. It's not something that was well used and well defined in 2018, and we're hoping that 2019 will be in a better position to take advantage of those systems.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had was at page 87 of the report, and it may be more of a question for Mr. Boileau, but the heart of the city, you say here, has 233 new applications, and the Brownfields has to date 29 new applications. So that looks pretty exciting. I'm not sure, what does that mean new? As of when new? Is that this year? Is that in the last year? Do you know? Mr. Boileau says he's not sure.
I think they are cumulative, but I'll let Ms. Peters.
Okay.
I believe the number. I suspect I agree with Mark that they may be cumulative. However, our programs coordinator Dana McLean wrote the sentence, so I trust her when it's saying new. I think what it could very well refer to is that when one project may have several applications to the program because they're accessing either a tax incentive grant or an interest-free loan, and they may be coming back on a number of occasions once they've received approved funding. So I'd have to get back to you on exactly what that means. I think the cumulative numbers are quite impressive. What I like to focus on is the ratio, and that for every dollar spent in the program, $5 is leveraged from the private sector and investments in Cornwall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are important numbers to focus in on. At various times of the year, and depending upon the economy, development activity may wane a little bit and then boost back up for a number of different reasons. So, and a number of different large commercial projects that may be taking advantage, for example, of the Brownfields program. So I can get back to you clarification on that, but I believe it may be a combination of cumulative as well as multiple applications on a singular property.
That'd be great. Thank you. I'm trying to, as mayor, I'm trying to, accept requests for tours of different locations, different businesses in the private sector. So I've toured La Framboise, and I was touring the Canadian Tire store because there's new franchisees there. And so they have questions about what's going on, especially in these sectors, because it's all connected, and good news means that they feel confident. So, yeah, any additional information would be great. Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. Through to Mr. Peters again. The criteria for the gas tax, or the money coming in from the hotels, does it include arts, or will it include the arts? Because if we could single out performing arts and the visual arts, the number of people we bring into the city, tourists we bring into the city for both, and I talk about also theater as one place where we could get numbers. Could the arts community apply for some of those funds if we knew that there were good numbers that were coming into the city? And is that on the table?
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. The criteria for grant applications to the Tourism Development Fund will be established by the board. We have provided some preliminary suggestions as to what would qualify and what would not. Trying to keep it as broad as and as inclusive as possible, but recognizing that this is a fund that was set up to encourage tourism activity. And at the end of the day, it's responsible to the Municipal Act and the section in which the Municipal Act allowed for the creation of the Municipal Accommodation Act. So it has to be a tourism event project. It has to, obviously, we believe, has to have benefit in Cornwall. And there's a number of other criteria. But to answer what I believe is your true question, we absolutely do believe that arts and culture events, especially those that have a tourism focus and are attracting people to the city, certainly should be eligible for funding. However, the final determination of the guidelines will be by that corporation.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments, questions? All in favor? Carried.
Our next item is the 2018 fourth quarter financial overview preliminary report with a recommendation that Council authorize the transfer of funds as follows. That $224,014 be transferred to the working reserve, that $986,989 be transferred to the tax stabilization reserve, that $300,000 be transferred to the winter control reserve, that $60,000 be transferred to the landfill reserve fund, that $186,059 be transferred to the water works reserve, and that $299,971 be transferred to the wastewater works reserve.
Councillor Elaine McDonald, seconded by Councillor Gardner. I'd like to turn to, before questions, turn to the CAO to see if she can provide us maybe with a summary as to what the fourth quarter financial overview looks like. Maybe turn to the CFO if needed as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I would like to maybe provide some brief introductory comments to the report. So quarterly, administration will come back during the year with updates on variances to budget that were previously approved by Council. I'd like to highlight that during March, MNP was on premises in financial services and various city departments to complete the audit. We will have our auditors here at our next council meeting to present financial statements. So MNP will be here along with our CFO to provide a presentation at council. And we typically come to council the meeting prior to that to get authorization for some of the reserves that those entries that we'd like to take place prior to MNP coming in and finalization of our statements. So Schedule 1 at the back of the report is really, I guess it's the first attachment after the report. That is really the nuts and bolts of all of the variances through the city's main taxation budget during the year, as well as on the following page we have our variances for our water and wastewater budgets. So with that, if there are any specific questions, we can direct those to Ms. Bailey. But just as an overview for process, that's where we are today. So we're wrapping up our year end and we'll have our auditors in at our next meeting.
Questions? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Two questions, and then perhaps a comment. Ms. Bailey, the 1 point, first of all, working reserve specifically, is that, so I understand, is that kind of like a general reserve that we use kind of as we need? Or like if something was to come up unexpected, is that kind of what that's earmarked for, or what exactly is the working reserve officially for?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the working reserve is used as cash flow for the city. It's a reserve that we have. We accumulation of our operating reserves, which includes the working reserve. We'd like to have that at about 10% of the previous year's levy as a target balance. Currently below that, but it is to have money set aside to support operations for the city if something comes to pass.
Next year, based on, and if I can remember correctly, you're anticipating in it's like the budget, it's like sort of master plan or financial plan. Did you not say we were looking at, based on your predictions, at about 4.5% next year?
For the increase to the city's levy?
Yes, assuming everything stays the same, we don't change our service or whatever.
That, it's possible. We'll take a look at that. That's part of our long-term financial planning. In those years, though, we didn't have revenue from development charges and such incorporated into those years. Our long-term financial planning document is pre-development charges.
Yes, I understand.
And so those will be incorporated in those numbers going forward.
Okay. Lastly, the 1.57 million approximate, is it safe to say that money has come from kind of like savings through our operating budget annually, like money that we thought we would have to spend that we didn't, whatever the case may be? Is that a safe assumption?
So each year the city does have variances throughout its operating and capital budgets. In years where there's surpluses, and in years where there's deficits, there's a requirement to take this report prior to the presentation of our financial statements to have those variances either contributed to or contributed from respective reserves. The 1.5 million that we see is very specific to some occurrences that have happened. One is the $987,000 that we're requesting or recommending be transferred to the tax stabilization reserve. That is for tax refunds that didn't occur in 2018, but will occur in a future year. There was also a savings in winter control of $330,000. We're requesting that $300,000 be contributed to the winter control reserve to bring that reserve to $600,000. And landfill also, you know that, as you're aware, our landfill closure, post-closure reserve is underfunded at this time. They did have a surplus within their own operating budget, $60,000. We're asking for those funds to be contributed there. We also had savings related, of course, to the work stoppage. The net savings from the work stoppage, lost revenue from those shared services departments for provincial and federal funding and contracted services was about another $600,000.
Okay, so in the pretty much the report. Thank you. Your Worship, I'm probably not going to support the motion. And the reason why is that once Council earmarks money to reserve funds, it's kind of hard to use them for anything other than exactly what we've earmarked them for. What I would prefer is to see them sort of sit a working reserve to be used as needed, as opposed to saying, well, this is, even though I realize some of these things are coming and we may end up having to do it anyway, I kind of would prefer the flexibility as a council to do what maybe we prefer depending on what happens. Once we put them in a certain bank account and we say, okay, this is for this particular cause, if something comes up, it becomes really difficult for council or admin or whomever to say, I know we had this for this, but we're going to use it for that now. It makes it far more difficult. I don't know if it's a philosophical thing or a policy thing. So I'm probably not going to support the motion. And if it got defeated, I'd probably make a motion to just see it left in working reserves. And I'm sure I'm probably making a mistake, but that's kind of where I'm going with. So I'm probably not going to support the motion as it's made. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Oh, I've got to follow up on that. Oh, Councillor Gardner.
I do have one, and it's a very simple yes or no answer. In the last number of years I was on council, every time the auditors came in, they said your reserves are low, or your reserves are low. Are we standing in a pretty good position now when Mr. Marco comes in and sits there and says, you're looking good on your reserves? Is that what's going to happen? Are you got close, yes or no?
Madam CFO?
Through
you can
Madam
do
Mayor.
more than yes or no.
It's going to be a more than yes or no. Currently, the city's reserves are very strong because the city has the Progress Fund. There's $25 million there. So collectively, the city is strong with reserves. We are underfunded in certain areas, though. Working reserves is one of them. And so when Mr. Markle comes to present from MNP, he is going to say that the city's financially sound and our reserves are strong, though it's because of certain reserves that we have in our portfolio that makes us strong. So our working reserves are good, but they're not at target balance.
But we're improving, and it seems to have been improving in the last few years, so thank you for your answer.
I'd like to follow up on Councillor Hollingsworth's comment. So what would it look like if we had more in a working reserve, right, with less in targeted reserves? Would that be difficult to manage, harder to manage, easier for us to deal with rainy days?
So through Madam Mayor, under page 90, I don't believe we're talking about recommendation E and F, because very specifically the surpluses for water and wastewater need to be contributed to those respective reserves.
Right.
There's no choice in that
Legislatively,
matter.
they have to go there.
Correct. But the first four, administration is making that recommendation because of where we've seen those surpluses accumulate from. And almost $1 million of that 1.5 is specifically for an appeal that we know that's coming. So to set those dollars in that very specific reserve, we know that those funds, not today, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe sometime during 2019 or 2020, they will not be part of the city's reserve any longer. So it's important for us to keep that in mind, that there is that outstanding appeal there, and that reserve, even at, I believe it will be with this contribution, $2.7 million, is probably underfunded.
Just want to follow up on, can I come back to you in a minute, Councillor Grant? Follow up on Councillor Gardner's comment about the targets for our reserves. So when I look at page 96, there's the detail of the reserves there. Do we have a column that has the targets for those? Yeah, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, on page 95,
okay.
You'll see the last column is targeted balance. And currently our operating reserves, which includes working reserves and winter control reserve, waste management reserve, et cetera, 8.6 million with a target balance of 6.6.
Mm-hmm.
That includes the 2.7 or $2.8 million for tax stabilization. We normally disregard that reserve knowing that those are committed, that's a committed refund more than likely in the next year or so.
Right.
So it is underfunded at this time, but I think doing well. Our capital reserves are at a negative. The target is 50% of the previous year's amortization, so that is 4.7 million. Most of that is because of the land reserve, of which once we sell that one property, that $2 million will be contributed back to this reserve, and we'll be in a better financial situation with our capital reserves. And then we have restricted reserves, and some of them have targeted balances and some do not, but they're there for you if you have any questions on them.
Okay. And those are set with our auditors, right? Is that a...
It is through our reserve and reserve fund policy.
Through the policy. Okay, thank you. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know where Councillor Hollingsworth was coming from, because working reserve is always good because the flexibility is there.
Mm-hmm.
But we know these three other areas here are coming close. Like, we know we had a terrible second January on for winter issues. So we're going to need that for next year. So to me, put them in those funds, and we can always move funds around at our discretion as a council. So I know there's some restrictions and some, but we can in generally move them. So I'm going to support this because I think it's a realistic report, and it's right in our face. So I'll support it.
Any further comments or questions? So the motion was made by Councillor Elaine and seconded by Councillor Sid. All in favor? Against? Carried.
Now we're going to go back to PAC report number 2 with respect to vacant 16-acre parcel along the northwest quadrant of Brookdale Avenue and south of Highway 401. And the recommendation is the council approve the PAC recommendations as presented. That the subject lands be rezoned from rural area to community commercial shopping center in support of a new automotive sales development, Cornwall Honda. And B, that findings and recommendations of the various associated studies and reports included but not limited to the stormwater management report, servicing report, stage 1 archaeological assessment, natural heritage impact statement, environmental impact statement, and geotechnical investigation be approved and implemented to the satisfaction of the municipality and agencies prior to proceeding with development of the subject site.
Moved by Councillor Elaine McDonald, seconded by Councillor Justin Towndale. Go ahead, Elaine.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really just pulled this to highlight it as a good news item. This, I think for a long time, had the idea that it would be wonderful to have a car lover's mecca to attract people as they drive by Cornwall. They'll see this spread at Brookdale and 401 and realize we've got something pretty exciting here. And this is a direct result of of our decision last year to extend sewer services up to the edge of the city. So, and coming on the same night that we have done the economic development report and the fourth quarter report, this is a piece of good news, and I just wanted to highlight it. The universe is unfolding as it should, and this is a pretty exciting development that's going to happen.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Any further comment? All in favor? Carried.
So we're moving on to tenders, Madam Mayor. The first tender, 19T05, supply and delivery of screen topsoil, with a recommendation that this tender be awarded to Restaurant Construction Limited from Cornwall at the total bid price of $78,003.90 for a 2-year period.
Moved by Councillor DePel, seconded by Councillor McIntosh. All in favor? Carried.
Tender 19T16, 2019 landfill gas collection system expansion, with the recommendation that this tender be awarded to W.H. McSweden Incorporated from Ottawa at the total bid price of $278,007.
Moved by Councillor Gardner, seconded by Councillor Hébert. All in favor? Carried.
Tender 19T23, supply of minor general construction services as required. The recommendation is this tender be awarded in a roster for the period of May 1st, 2019 to April 30th, 2021, with the option to renew for up to 2 one-year extensions as follows. Carl Bullock Construction Limited at $33.25 per hour, Seaway Construction at $42.50 per hour, Rose Mechanical at $55 per hour, and Anderson Electric Incorporated at $70 per hour.
Moved by Councillor Elaine McDonald, seconded by Councillor Caroline Hébert. In discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Tender 19T27, supply of hot mix asphalt. The recommendation that this tender be awarded to Coco Paving Incorporated from Ottawa at the total bid price of $190,519.70.
Moved by Councillor Towndale, seconded by Councillor DePel. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Tender 19T28, supply and delivery of ready-mix concrete as required, with a recommendation that this tender be awarded to Grant Ready Mix Limited from Cornwall at the total bid price of $97,625.11.
Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor McDonald. Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Tender 19T29, supply and equipment and manpower for placing hot mix asphalt. The recommendation that this tender be awarded to G.W. Blais Paving Limited from St. Andrews West as follows. Section A at the total bid price of $474,035, and Section B at the total bid price of $22,148.
Moved by Councillor Gardner, seconded by Councillor McDonald. Any debate? All in favor? Carried. You know what this means, eh? Work, spring, paving.
Good news, all of it.
Tender 19T32, supply and placing of nursery sod as required. The recommendation that this tender be awarded to Nix from Long Sault at the total bid price of $90,739.
Moved by Councillor Dupel, seconded by Councillor Grant. All in favor? Carried.
And our last item, Microsoft Office 365. The action recommended is that council approve a 3-year leasing contract with Microsoft Office 365 for the delivery of Outlook, SharePoint, and Microsoft Office within a cloud-based environment.
Councillor Elaine McDonald, seconded by Councillor Justin Towndale. Any debate? Any hallelujahs? Hallelujahs.
2 hands.
I think everyone's in favor, but let's see. All in favor? All right, carried.
Madam Mayor, we have no new business items this evening. So we're going to move on to the bylaws.
May I ask to pull out the bylaw on the permit fees?
So that is bylaw 27.
Yes.
Um,
We could
so-
discuss that one separately.
Yes,
after.
so let's
Thank
get a
you.
motion for the rest, and then we'll discuss that one.
Correct.
The motion, or we're looking for a motion that bylaw 2019-37 to 41 inclusive, listed on the agenda, be taken as read and passed.
Councillor Justin Towndale, Councillor Todd Bennett. Any debate? All in favor? Carried.
And the subject bylaw 27 is a bylaw under the Building Code Act 1992, respecting construction, demolition, and change of use permits and related matters.
All right, so that is the one that we discussed 2 weeks ago, and we put it on the agenda for tonight to give some additional time for comment. We did get some comment, notably from the Cornwall Construction Association. That was circulated to everyone. I believe you also got some comments from Sandy Cameron as well. And I'm wondering if we could have Mr. Rogers respond to any of that, if he's able to, if he's taken the time to take a look.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did respond to the correspondence from the Cornwall Construction Association, to yourself, and members of council earlier today. And specific concerns in here would appear to be a fee increase that applies to a hypothetical 1,800 square foot home. That fee increase is shown as basically that we're going from $1,812 under the current fee regime to a fee of $3,060. First and foremost, for clarity's sake, I would like to correct that. The actual proposed fee of that hypothetical house, 1,800 square feet, would actually be $2,600, not $3,060. And that's basically because we're moving to a flat fee regime. To get into some numbers, so it's an 1,800 square foot house. The first 1,400 square feet is a flat fee of $2,100. The remaining 400 square feet would be 400 square feet multiplied by $1.25 per square foot. That comes to a grand total of $2,600. So to be clear, we're referencing $2,600. That is what the fee would be under the proposed fee adjustments and the proposed formula. So I've outlined that in my email to yourself, Your Worship, and Council earlier this afternoon.
Okay. So I'd like to get a motion on the floor, and then we can debate that. So the motion is to approve the fees as presented at the last council meeting. Is there a motion? Councillor Elaine McDonald, seconded by Councillor Gardner. So debate. Councillor Bergeron.
A few questions, I believe, for Mr. Rogers. You just stated in your email to us, which was very thorough and detailed, that the rate is going up from $1,800 to $2,600 by your corrected numbers. That to me is an increase of about 33%, if I'm, is that correct?
Approximately.
By my math. That seems like an awfully high percentage for a 1-year increase, so, I mean, philosophically, I'm not really in favor of increasing fees in general for building permits, but certainly I would love to see a motion if someone wanted to put forward having this increase go over 3 to 5 years. I think it's a lot to ask right away, considering we added development charges last year. Can you maybe speak to the effects of increasing that fee from over the next 3 to 5 years, what it would have actually on the department?
Well, I can think of the fact that we have the anticipated revenue from permit fees have been included in the forecasted budget for 2019. So that is a potential immediate effect. I may also offer that if you refer to my report and some clarity that I've offered today, the permit fees presently are based on a construction cost that dates back to the year 2005. So if we were to bring that into the current, if we consider that inflation is approximately 2 to 3% a year, that $90, assuming that that was representative of market value for 2005, has been compromised by 35 to 40%. So, as an experiment, if we took current market construction costs and plugged them into even the existing fee formula, as illustrated in my email this afternoon, the fee using current market value construction costs, by the way, accessed from the Altus Group, their cost construction index, the fee would actually be within $50 to $75 of the $2,600 that the new fee regimen will cause on this 1,800 square foot hypothetical house. Further, sir, I would offer that we have also referenced South Stormont, and I would offer that that's not necessarily equitable, as they are a rural municipality, an urban municipality, and we have plugged they have a similar fee formula to our prevailing one. We've plugged their construction values of $111 per square foot into the existing fee formula, and the fee, reasonable fee, comes within, I think, $5 to $10 of the $2,600. That, again, would be the proposed fee on this hypothetical house.
May I follow up?
Yes, please.
South Stormont or South Glengarry have development charges added to the cost of a new building?
I believe that South Stormont has, I'm not quite sure, sir. Through you, Madam
Mr.
Mayor.
Boileau?
No. Of the two neighbors, we have South Glengarry have a connection fee of approximately $10,000. South Stormont does not have a fee.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, to me, it comes down to a philosophical question about construction, about building new homes, and who we compete with in reality. And I appreciate that South Stormont is a rural municipality, and so is South Glengarry, but in reality, if I'm going to build a house here, those are my two places that I would consider. Given that we've added development charges last year, which I would have been opposed to, and I'm aware they exist, and that's okay, I just can't support the fee increase. I think I will vote to defeat this. Thank you.
Okay. I have Councillor DePell and then Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I voted for the development charges, and of course we played with that for quite some time. So I do understand, through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Rogers, his correspondence to us today is very clear, and I realize that, you know, when you lay out all the numbers, they're there, but I do, as my councillor colleague Bergeron points out, it is a hefty increase all at once. So I would like to see it phased in. And I guess I just, for clarification purposes, through you to maybe the CAO, would we, without passing a bylaw prior to budget, would we project revenues that we're not sure we were going to even have a bylaw for? Like that alarms me now, that when I think back of looking at the different departments that were projecting revenues that have the bylaw hasn't even passed at council yet. So I'm a little concerned that we're actually approving budgets with projected revenues that we don't have a bylaw passed.
Madam CEO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, we have done that several times in the past. We've certainly done it in, if I look back in the planning department, we did not do it with respect to development charges, but we have done it for other fees, and I think several years ago, the last time we may have adjusted some of our building permit fees slightly. I think we had budgeted that. It's also budgeted sort of midway through the year. So it's not as though it's a 12-month variance. So if we're looking at that phase in, and we're phasing it in for whether it's 8 months or 6 months of the year, that is somewhat reduced, and then also it's dependent on our best estimates for activity as well. So I don't know that the variance would be quite as significant, but when we're planning our budgets, we do plan accordingly, because we're anticipating that we will be coming back to council with recommendations to move the fees. So
perhaps moving forward, then maybe for future reference in budgets, that maybe we could have highlighted in the budget, that there is that potential revenue prior to having a bylaw passed. So I'm with Councillor Bergeron. I mean, I certainly would support an increase, but I would like to see it phased in, and for that reason, I won't support the bylaw that's before us this evening.
Councillor Grant?
What'd you call me?
Glenn Grant. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I had some of the same questions that Councillor Bergeron had about the percentage and thanks for the answer about if we did inflation from 205, you said, till current, through you, I think it was 205, wasn't the last increase?
That's correct. I
205. And so the last increase is 205. So basically, what the report I heard before is our residents are subsidizing new development for the permit department areas. So my argument has always been, why should I be subsidizing new development? And this is what the argument I get in the street. When they heard these figures, you don't think about it, but now when you see it in reality, I look at these increases and they're due. They're overdue, actually, and there should be, and I like the way that you have it, it's going to be inflation from this point on, so we don't end up with this argument in another 15 years or 14 years or whatever it is. So I'm going to support this because I think it's fair for the residents in our community. And they're the ones that are paying the tax bill every year, and I don't think they should be subsidized. So I'll support the recommendations.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. One quick question. I think I know the answer to it, but let's make sure I know what I'm talking about here. Essentially, increase in fees represents cost to the municipality, correct? Like when we increase our fees, we're recouping the cost it is for us to perform whatever services vis-a-vis buildings, whether it be building inspections or site plan, whatever the case may be. So these represent us recouping our costs. Is that making sense?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it represents an improvement in the recouping of our costs. We presently recoup for building services, so building permits, building permit review, subsequent site inspections. We currently recoup on average about 55%.
55%.
These fee adjustments are anticipated to take us to approximately 70-75%.
Thank you. That being said, Your Worship, commend Councillor Bergeron for bringing it to a philosophical debate. Philosophically speaking, Your Worship, the fundamental question is who should pay for services? Is it the user or is it the taxpayer? Take a bus, the taxpayer subsidizes some and the user pays some. If I decide to register my kids at hockey, I pay some and the taxpayer pays some. My kids go to post-secondary education, I pay some and the taxpayer pays some. So technically speaking, right now, the municipality, assuming these rates are implemented, will be subsidizing building as such, or the cost of doing building in the city, to the tune of about 45%. Well, certainly 33% raise is unfortunate. Probably should have instituted a percentage increase over time so that we wouldn't get this big heavy. Most regrettable, to be sure. But the bottom line is that taxpayers at large, I'm not sure if it's their responsibility to sort of supplement building. Maybe you can debate, yes, they should for growth purposes, and maybe we shouldn't. I'm not sure where you can kind of peg it at, but all we're really asking for in this case is that the people who are using the service pay, perhaps, I don't know where the number should be set. We've decided it's 55%. And that being said, we're in a user pay world. It's the new trend. It's what everybody wants. So quite frankly, this simply represents the direction that the taxpayers seem to want us to go in the first place. So I'm going to support the recommendation.
Councillor Elaine McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I agree with my colleagues who support this fee increase. I supported it. I supported the development charges bylaw too. And I do so because the only way taxes can be borne is if they're fair. And it's not fair for the taxpayer at large, who's not the benefiting parties, to subsidize those who are the benefiting parties. So I do support this increase, and I think that it's fair to our residents. But I do have a question for Mr. Rogers. I think it's lamentable that we have shied away from, keeping this fee increased over the years. And I note that now we're not still going to be at 100% pay. Will we ever get to that point where the fee covers the total cost? Or will we continue to be subsidizing the developers?
I would share what the consultant, Mr. Jim Bazuzzi, has shared with us. As you're aware, the province of Ontario dictates the municipality must levy fees in excess of 100% of their expenditures to provide that service. They do allow you, however, to exceed that in measure if that's to fund a reserve fund. And that reserve fund is to avoid building services divisions through a rainy day. Okay? So Mr. Berzuzzi has offered that while it's common for larger municipalities to have about a year to 2 years of operating revenues in the reserve kitty, smaller operations like ours, it's not that common. Why? Because the project mix tends to be on the smaller side. So he, of course, has suggested that we should keep aiming for 100%, and better still, a reserve. But that we don't reach it, it's not out of par with municipalities of our size. We tend to fund our reserve. We tend to depend on one-off large projects. They are a sort of a one-time anomaly, but they do top up the reserves. But to depend on the mainstream permit mix to fund a reserve, as it does in a large municipality, it's tended to be unlikely.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
I'm not going to repeat what everybody else has been saying on the positive side. Councillor Grant said quite well how I felt. Having sat on council for 11 years and not having done what we should have done during the years I was on council, and that was increase the fees little by little every year, it's gotten to a point where we have to do it now. So I'm going to support the motion to do it. As a taxpayer myself, I don't want to be subsidizing contractors for building houses. It's just shouldn't come out of my money. Should come out of the new owners. It should I'm just going to support it. I've already read the report, and I was going to support it to begin with.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor McIntosh.
Through you to Chris, how many homes, what was the average size of a home in Cornwall? A new home?
So we have, I must acknowledge, members of the Cornwall Construction Association here. They probably better able to answer that than myself, but I would say 12 to 13 to 1400 square foot.
1,800 is pretty...
That's the norm for Cornwall.
Yeah, okay. And regarding the, my colleague says 33%, but forgets to mention we'd be the first to increase 14 years, and it's been mentioned many times around here, and I think the consultant mentioned that this is a case where we weren't paying attention, we just let it go, and now we're paying the price. Remember, in county next door got behind in water, and all once they got hit with a 36% increase, everybody thought they were getting a great deal until 8 years later they got the bill and said, hey, by the way, we forgot to charge you, now we got to charge you. So it's really a catch-up thing.
Any other comment? I too want to echo the same thoughts as Councillor Grant and Councillor McIntosh. I think that while I appreciate that the developer community is here and has been present throughout the consultation process, I appreciate the professional way as well that you have communicated with this council throughout the process. At the same time, 2005 is a long time ago, and what I'm most encouraged by is that we're going to try and keep up with inflation, because this is not a pleasant thing to do, not a pleasant discussion to have after all these years, and we need to really pay closer attention and keep up. So that being said, I'm going to support the motion. So I'm going to call the vote.
Recorded vote, Madam Mayor.
Yeah. Madam Clerk.
Councillors Claude McIntosh.
In favor.
Elaine McDonald.
In favor.
Sid Gardner.
In favor.
Dean Hollingsworth.
In favor.
Caroline Hébert.
In favor.
Councillors Modeste Dupel.
Opposed.
Glenn Grant.
In favor.
Todd Bennett.
In favor.
Justin Towndell.
Yes.
Éric Bergeron.
Opposed.
And Madam Bear.
In favor.
9-2-2.
Carries. Thank you.
The next portion of the agenda is the reports from standing and special committees of council.
So are there any reports from committees? I know that we're just sort of getting back on track with that. We have a bylaw on tonight confirming the remaining councillor appointments. We continue to recruit for lay appointments, so the committee should be up and running. I want to remind council that we're going to be discussing mandates of committees as well as part of our strategic planning process. Councillor Elaine McDonald and then Councillor Dupel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This isn't from the Standing Committee of Council, it's from all of Council. A big thank you to our communications officer, Emma Meldrum, who organized the City Central at the Home and Trade Show this year. And it was absolutely masterfully laid out and well attended, and I think our residents appreciate so much being able to just casually ask the questions, you know. I mean, they might not want to phone because they're not sure which department they want to talk to, but they can just walk around and I think almost every department, if I'm not mistaken, every department was represented there, and not specifically attached to departments necessarily. Many of the councillors too were floating there to be available to answer questions that people had. So well done, Ms. Meldrum, and it was really great that the city did that, and may they continue.
Agreed. Thank you, Ms. Meldrum. It was success, and thank you to all the councillors who were there as well, taking questions and comments from residents who were quite happy to see city officials there as well, elected officials there as well. So thank you. Councillor Dupel and then Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say, as you spoke about appointments to committees, so we have done some lay appointments, and I just want to say that this is National Volunteer Week, so I'd like to send a shout out to those who have been appointed and sit as lay appointments, to the Adopt a Street volunteers, to the people who kept our city rinks looking great this winter. So just a shout out to all of the volunteers that make this corporation that much better. So.
Thank you for that, Councillor DePell, and I think we need to pay closer attention to how we thank our lay appointment committee members in the future, and I think that's part of the discussion we're going to have as well during our strategic planning process. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When, a few residents have come to me and said, when do you believe that you'll have all the lay appointments members in place? I didn't have an answer to that question, so.
Thank you. Madam
Through
Clerk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we did extend the deadline so that we could cover the Home and Trade Show, and we did that. The deadline is this Friday, the 12th, so the lay appointments should be done through the Lay Appointments Committee on the 23rd, and closed meeting then, and then by bylaw, the first meeting of May.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I want to remind residents to go on to the city website. Ms. Meldrum has titled it Be the Voice of Your Community. We really are trying to recruit as many people, new people too, to sit on committees. We need as many people as possible, different perspectives as well. Any further comments from committees?
I have no notices of motion, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
And the pending listing, the action recommended is that Council receive the unfinished business listing for April 8th, 2019.
Motion. Councillor DePell and Councillor Bennett, all in favor?
Bylaw 43 is a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the City of Cornwall at its meeting held this evening, Monday, April 8th.
Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Elaine McDonald. All in favor? Carried.
And our next regular public meeting will be held on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019. We are looking for motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Hébert, all in favor? Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Merci.
Anytime. I live just over there, you know.